What if AI, climate change, and human division are leading us straight towards extinction? Today I sit down with David Collier to unpack 3 megatrends shaping our future and ask, is there still time to change course? We explore that next on the podcast. Let's do this.
Welcome to the No Sitting on the Sideline Dad podcast, a podcast about a journey of discovery and conversations about not sitting on the sideline of life. Let's get involved. Here's host Joe Foley.
Hey, it's Joe. Glad you're here today. Just me and you for a bit. So a few months back, right in the thick of election season, I sat down for a conversation that really stuck with me. You know, during elections, tension run high, and it feels like the world's pulling us in different directions. Well, that's exactly the backdrop we're talking about today, and I'm also talking to my guest, David Collier. He got some big ideas about where we're heading with climate change, AI that's moving faster than we can keep up with, and honestly, just the way we humans keep butting heads. But here's the thing. This isn't just a talk about problems. We get really into practical stuff, the things you and I can actually do, especially as parents, to make a difference. So take a breath, settle in, let's get into it. Welcome to the podcast, David.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
The one that I'm glad to have you on today, because I'm curious, and it's really important to have this conversation, is the 3 megatrends. What are the 3 megatrends?
The 3 megatrends, which I believe will move humanity toward extinction at some future point in time, are climate change and global warming, another term for this, which we know about and hear about probably too much. But the other 2 megatrends are unregulated AI and, of course, the non-cooperating and bickering humans. And I believe that these 3 trends are converging now, and they confront humanity with obstacles and challenges that we've never had to face in the past. All 3 of them together, one way or the other, are global. And if we can't learn to cooperate and help the planet cool down a bit, and if we can't regulate AI, the theme of my novel series is that unregulated AI and climate destruction and non-cooperating humans, at least climate destruction and bickering humans, they weaken humanity. And then AI sits on the sidelines, takes over our energy systems, takes over our transportation systems, because it's more efficient, more cost-effective, more economical. Heaven forbid if they were to take over our weapon systems, our financial systems. And then one day AI, which is much smarter than us, says, hey, why do I need humans? And they take over Earth's biosphere. And so that's the theme of the novel series.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned about the 3 megatrends also, but one other one was climate change. And I'll be honest with you, I'm a little skeptical about it. I believe there's something going on, but I'm not quite sure. So I always like to look for information and stuff like that. But do you think sometimes, is it man-made or is the Earth going through trends?
And I have studied this for 40 years. When I got my first degree in engineering, mechanical engineering, my favorite course was thermodynamics, and that's the study of heat. The other thing is, in a past life as a university faculty member, I taught, and I also taught statistics. So the answer is, I've been studying this for at least 40 years, actually ever since Sputnik was shot up in 1957. That's what got me into the science stuff. And I've been doing this a long time. Now, on climate change and destruction, some of it is absolutely obvious. The rainforest being destroyed, pollution, you can take a net or something and pick up 800 tons of plastic. I mean, some things are just totally obvious. But on terms of heat content, I agree. I would not look at just one study. And over my time, I have a file here where I've looked at studies from India, China, many from the US, many from the European Union. And has the temperature really gone up? Or are the glaciers and ice caps melting? Uh, and so when I say I believe in climate change or global warming, I'm basing that on 6, 8 independent, totally independent scientific studies with people much more knowledgeable than me about all these. Now, you ask another question, Joe, and very good question. And I'm not the expert, but I'll give you the gist of what I do know. There are big cycles of what happens with the Earth. One of them is a cycle that's every 26 million years, and it has to do with some physics of the moon and the Earth, and I'm not the one to explain that. But the Earth tilts a little bit more, and a few other things happen, and there's a big cycle like that. And then there's 4 or 5 inner cycles within that big cycle, and they overlap in complex ways. Okay. And yes, is there a glacial cycle that happens every 100,000 million years? I'm sure there probably is. And like I say, some scientists could explain this much better than I can. What people I don't think do understand, it's not one cycle. There's 2, 3, 4, 5 different overlapping cycles, and you've got all that going on. But I will tell you, if you look at the temperature graphs, and I won't go through all the stats, the data shows that in the last 100 years, the temperature of our beautiful, wonderful little planet, we're the stewards of our planet, has gone up exponentially. The other thing I just read the other day was in the last 16 of the last, I think, since 2000, 16 of years since, it'll be 24 years, 16 out of 24 years were all-time highs in terms of average global temperature of the planet. That's not random. I teach statistics. That's not random. So that's my answer to you. And there are, as I say, don't ever look at just one study. And by the way, I probably have read a couple hundred pages, 300 or 400 pages of the arguments against global warming. And they do, sometimes they'll pick out a study and they'll show some of the scientific assumptions and maybe some of the errors or perceived errors that they made in that study. And when I say, okay, so yeah, maybe that isn't a great study. So anyway, that's my thoughts on, is global warming something we should be concerned about? And my personal conclusion, and everybody's got to come to their own conclusion, is absolutely. We're going to be, in my second novel, all of humanity's wearing cooling vests. The average temperature outside is 130, 142 degrees. We often, only the rich people with 100 tons of air conditioning or living underground are going to be here. The rest of us are going to be gone.
Interesting. We'll think about, we were talking and stuff like that about where different things and everything. I noticed in the last few years, this is a trend up here where I live in New Hampshire. We've been having droughts, severe drought weather and stuff like that, which there's been a trend in the last few years we've never seen before. And also the winters haven't been as bad, which is different too. So I noticed that too. And the one thing I was also, when you mentioned about plastics, that's a man-made problem. We watch those TV shows, YouTube channels, that are driving the boats around and stuff, and the plastic gets into the ocean. And that's becoming a problem because it gets into the food supply and gets into our humans.
Absolutely. And there's some studies that talk about it's even in our municipal water system, and then it's in the food we eat. So if you were to look at a sample of what's in my stomach or intestines, you'd find all these little microplastics in there. That's not good.
Now, I can imagine what it does to the human body and stuff like that too, because of the long-term effects, can really have serious consequences.
Absolutely. And again, I'm not the expert on that. By the way, I want to mention something. You mentioned New Hampshire. I had been fortunate enough to buy a little place in Maine. I'm a snowbird, reverse snowbird. I spend most of my 7 months or so in Florida and the rest up in Maine. And we have some great friends in Maine, and some of them are lobster men and go out every day. And the whole lobster fields and stuff are moving north because the water's getting warmer. Another problem is the Gulf Stream. Used to be at a certain strength and temperature, and it seems to be weakening. Now, if the Gulf Stream weakens, it changes everything, particularly up at Greenland and over into England in terms of it makes England colder.
Oh, wow.
So you got the Gulf Stream, you got the jet streams, and I have great empathy for the lobster men and the lobster industry in Maine. And I've tried to do a few things to support and help them. And they've also got a similar problem with it being too warm in Maine to do oysters and certain kinds of mussels and things like that. So it's having a profound effect on the livelihood of quite a few people on the coast of Maine.
A while back, I was actually had an opportunity, I forgot what the name of the gentleman was, but had an opportunity to speak to somebody about there was technology out there that can pull CO2 from almost like a filter. And I've actually seen it online on a video about it and happening over in Europe that filters the CO2 out of the atmosphere. And it's an interesting way to using technology.
Yes. And actually, I just read an article, probably as you did, and I've read 4 or 5 others over the last few years. There's several initiatives in the scientific community with algae, bacteria, and even a synthetic sponge that has certain carbon absorbing attributes. And we're talking about, I have great respect for the scientific community. So we're talking about the molecular structure of say, it's not a sponge, but I'll call it a sponge. And it is set up to absorb the maximum amount of carbon, CO2 gases. And yes, these are things that can help. There's scrubbers, test scrubbers, big machines with fans in Europe that are being tested and run. And my only complaint or concern about that is humanity. I talked to you about Star Trek one time. Humanity has this, technology will save us. We don't have to worry about it. Technology will save us. The problem is we took several hundred years, maybe 200-300 years to get in this situation. And I don't think we have the time to take all that carbon out of the atmosphere, free the ocean up to make oxygen and all the things we have to do. I'm an advocate of, hey, yes, that technology will help. And maybe if everybody got together, say in the United Nations, and said, hey, let's spend $5 trillion a year doing this. Now, what do you think of that idea? We can't cooperate on anything, but that's the kind of, Joe, we don't need a few 200 billion. It's nothing. We need massive efforts. Let me give you one example of something on climate change. Jakarta, Indonesia is moving Jakarta to Borneo. And the reason it's costing them $32 billion is the initial estimate. And basically what they're doing is they're moving their capital city because of sea level rise, heat, not enough water, and basically pollution. And that city had 10 million or something like that in it. In Miami, just 2 years ago, they spent $41 million to raise the road in South Beach, Florida, 2 feet higher.
Oh, wow.
Now, one estimate is in the next 30 years, they need $1.8 billion in bonds. Okay. And who's going to have to pay that? Taxpayer?
Taxpayers.
To do other things like that to keep Miami afloat. So there are many cities, New Orleans, obviously, Houston, Miami, and then you can go overseas and go to London and Bangkok and a whole bunch of other places. They're all being impacted by it. And so far, we've probably only had, depending on what study you want to look at, 6 inches of sea level rise in the last 100 years. NOAA forecast a foot in the next 30.
Oh, wow. Definitely interesting too. But you mentioned another thing about one of the mega trends I thought it was interesting too is the unregulated AI. AI is booming right now, and that's a big deal in society now. It has its upsides, it has its downsides, but I think unregulated can have a problem. Like I think AI, like for an example, I was just reading something today. AI just beat doctors in diagnosing illnesses, and I mean that could be a helpful tool. Could it get it wrong? Could it be helpful? But also, what's one of your thoughts about that?
You're right. We're gonna have the avatar lawyer who can do 60, 70, 80% of the work of the legal community. Probably can't go to court, but I'm not even sure about that. But yes, you take a typical 28-year-old brand medical student, and probably AI could do a better job of diagnosing an illness than the young doctor, or maybe an old doctor for all I know. On this AI, I do want to tell you, I'm not the only one talking about we need to absolutely regulate the AI from the beginning. I want to read a quote Elon Musk said. For over 20 years, I have been an advocate of AI regulation, just as we regulate any product or technology that is a potential risk to the public. Bill Gates, a lot of folks that know a lot about computers have absolutely advocated that we need, and the United States is way behind, Joe. Europe is at least a decade ahead of us.
It was interesting too. I was saying about unregulated because it seems like it's an arm race to get everybody. Every other week, there's a new Chat GPT put something out, Copilot put something out. It's like an arm race, and it's almost scary because the society consequences is really tremendous.
Yeah, and when I try to talk about what can we do to mitigate some of this, one of the best studies that I've found, and it probably has the most impact, is in Europe, the European Union has passed the Digital Services Act in 2022 and the Digital Marketing Act in 23. And both of these acts are very comprehensive, and they're written if you Google them and read them, you will find that they're written in a very understandable format. And of course, I printed out both of these and read them extensively. And those are two, Europe is at least a decade ahead. And when you talk to a politician or elected official in Europe, they have a policy on AI. They have a policy on climate mitigation. And then in the US, where you're going to find not the only source, but one that has actually passed some great laws is California. They have passed several, not near as comprehensive as what they've done in Europe, but they have passed very narrow laws on that is the beginning of AI regulation. And so there's some hope there. But one of the things when I'm talking to young people, and I just did a podcast with college students the other day, is, hey, your elected officials, ask them, what's your policy on AI? And if they look at you and go, duh, okay, that's good, because you are challenged then. You're the public, you're the educated public that has the citizens that have to challenge these folks. And then the next time they come out in public, they'll have read or got their staff and studied this a little bit. And they'll say, yeah, here's some things I'm thinking about proposing for our state legislature or something. But absolutely, we can ask questions like that, and we can vote and support and even campaign for people that support regulating AI and climate mitigation. And then the third one, which is the most difficult, is anything we can do to enhance human cooperation and getting along with each other.
It's interesting too, because right now we had an election in the United States and we've been so divided on both sides. It is crazy. There's no middle anymore. You're either on the left or you're on the right. It's tribal. It's actually, it's an interesting watch, but it's also pretty disheartening at the same time.
Yes. And I have used the word tribal in my third novel. And some people said, hey, David, don't use that word. That's not a nice word to use. But you got to use a word that's powerful. And if you notice, I started off saying non-cooperating and bickering humans. But it is just terrible in terms of non-cooperation. We don't cooperate on anything. And getting back to statistics a minute, all these national surveys on the election had candidate A a little bit ahead. If you look down at the bottom and you know anything about statistics, their sample size is 800 people, 1,000 people. And you're going to take that small a sample size and infer to 200 million. No, it doesn't work. And were those surveys and all that stuff general wrong? Yes.
Mhm.
And if you were a statistician, you would expect it because the sample sizes weren't big enough.
It's interesting. We're talking about that for the election for a second. And I'm going to talk about politics, what side I'm on, or that doesn't really matter. But I went to vote on election day. And after I voted, I was driving down the street. And I saw the same old woman, she's probably in her mid-60s, driving her bike. And at the time, she was taking out her opposing, she was driving over opposing person she didn't like signs. And I gave her a little bit of credit. I'm like, I'll give her leeway. She may have ran over one because she's driving on the grass. But all of a sudden, she was intentionally taking all out the ones she didn't like. And I'm like, wow, we've gotten to that point in society that we can disagree. You might not like politician A, and you like politician B. But we got to the point now that it's gone to be pure hatred for the other side.
Yes. And again, I'm on the perimeter of this and I read a little bit, but you'd have to get some psychiatrist, a well-known psychiatrist or something like that to talk about. I think social media has split us further apart. Now, in many things, it's brought us together, but you can, no matter what's your view, way over to the left, way over to the right, you can find your group on social media. And maybe that's good, maybe it's not, but yes, I find it, yes, tearing up signs, shouting, yelling, wanting to fight. That's all the things, those same behaviors, Joe, are going to keep us from doing anything super substantial on climate change and AI. And if we just keep doing what we're doing now is somewhere between terrible to maybe mediocre. We're doing a little bit here and there. And some countries are doing more, some are doing less. If dickering humans continues to the level it is, and we keep up with this pace of not doing enough on these issues, we're going to end up like my second novel. In my second novel, Florida is half underwater, and where the whole novel takes place is Lakeland, Florida. And if you know where that is, that's just northeast a little bit of Tampa, and it's a coastal city then. It's a coastal city.
And interesting too, because why did you pick the sci-fi genre? Because I think I love sci-fi. I've always been a Star Trek fan. I'm a little bit of Star Wars, but I'm more been a Star Trek fan. And my other one favorite is Doctor Who. I don't know if you heard of Doctor Who.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Doctor Who. But why did you pick the sci-fi genre for your books?
That's a very good question. First, I picked fiction because in the first novel is Earth's Exocide, and then it's Hope 2147. And so the first novel takes place in the year 2147. And to make a long story short, in the very beginning, a farmer walks out at night and sees a glow in a field in a thoroughbred horse farm, on a horse farm. and it's an orb, small round orb hovering above the earth. And so that's where you get the fantasy and the sci-fi. And this orb causes a lot of media attention. 100,000 people congregate around it and so forth and so on. And it comes to Earth offering a solution to global warming. And then the first novel talks about all that. And of course, humanity does nothing that the orb recommended or would help us with. And by the way, my books are not religious at all. I usually use the concept of universal consciousness and a couple other things. So the orb is, I never say in the 5 novels that I'm writing, whether it's divine, whether it's an alien, whether it's universal consciousness. I don't address that because that's not the focus of the stories. But anyway, and then you get to some of the later novels, the last 2, and all of humanity is wiped out on Earth, but our souls remain. And then there's another whole science fiction and fantasy side to it. So that's why I did fiction, is because it is fiction. It's my concepts in my head. And by the way, in the 5th novel,
Yes.
in the 4th novel, into the 3rd, robots called the Imperium control the whole Earth's biosphere, which is ocean, land, and atmosphere. In the 5th novel, toward the end of it, humanity comes back. The souls are embodied. In other words, they come back in human bodies again, and they attempt to reclaim Earth. That's the way my novel series ends. We're kicked out of Earth because of a whole bunch of reasons, and then we eventually come back. And when we come back, we're wiser and smarter about we're the stewards, we're the stakeholders of this tiny little speck called Earth. And we need to protect it, nourish it, and that's the theme of the novels.
What kind of feedback have you gotten about the book? Any feedback? Anybody reached out to you and mentioned anything about the books?
Yeah, I get positive reviews, and through my website, which I let me tell you, that's www.theentity.us. And the entity has 2 E's. And yeah, through my website, I get people, even if they haven't read the book, if they looked at my website, and positive. In fact, most people are saying, hey, you're a thought leader, and no one's put these 3 things together like you have. And you've actually written a novel series that would be a guidepost to humanity about this is what's going to happen if you do nothing or do very little. And then you give hope toward the end of the novel series of, okay, AI took over the planet, but we're going to go back and reclaim it.
It's one of those things like we mentioned earlier in the interview and stuff like that. We talked about AI, and AI, it's like all of a sudden, if AI doesn't want us here anymore, it's like you guys are a pain in the butt to deal with. It can get rid of us. You're done. And that's scary too.
Hey, but AI, can a robot walk out in 142-degree air temperature and be fine? Yeah, their mechanical and metal parts don't melt into several thousand degrees, or maybe tens of thousands of degrees. So they can handle the heat. They don't need they need a little bit of water to clean up some of their equipment, but basically they don't need food or water. All they need is electricity. That's all they need. And in this novel series, humanity and what's left of humanity and these Imperium robots, that's what we're fighting over most of the time is electricity. And usually that's a nuclear reactor or some other kind of thing to create electricity. But yeah, the robots are going to look around and say, these biological things are weaklings. They don't serve any purpose for us. So why don't we just get rid of them?
And it could happen. That's a scary thought. One thing I was interested in too, being a parent myself, I was wondering, some practical solutions, maybe something I could leave with other parents about some of the stuff we talked about tonight.
Yeah. And I've got a huge list of all of that. I've got well over 300 actions that people can take or groups can take on climate mitigation. I've got probably 50 or 100 on regulating AI, and maybe in general terms, a couple dozen on trying to be better citizens and stop all this bickering and human discord. But real quick, and I know we're running out of time, but the simple solutions on mitigation could be having your sports team or your Cub Scout group or your school class, elementary, doesn't matter what, go out and plant some trees or clean up a pond or clean up a lake. I don't think I want young kids out cleaning up a highway with all the nuts on the highways. But you get the idea. Anything that would work in a food bank or make meals for people that need meals. Another thing is put LED light bulbs in your home. They use 50 to 75% less energy and they last 10 to 25 times longer. And you can cut your electric bill quite a bit with LED lights. So those are just, and I'll stop right there, but I've got another 290 something things we could chat about there. On AI, I would simply say the number one thing is challenge anyone who is an elected official. What's your policy on AI? What are you doing on AI? And students and young students, they can discuss this with their parents, and maybe they could even have a course project at school on regulating or not. What are the pros and cons of regulating and not regulating AI? They could do the same thing on climate mitigation. Or another great project for a young person or an older person would be to go look at these two big acts, the Digital Services Act, the Digital Market Act in Europe. And it's a very easy read. There may be a more technical version behind this, but I haven't seen it. And seventh, eighth grader could read that and write a report on it and present it to the class, something like that. But voting and getting elected officials that can actually take action, pass some regulations and laws are just a few of the things on AI that we could do. And then on human discord and bickering, join groups, any kind of group that attempts to mitigate all the arguing and fighting that we seem to do. And I'll pick out a couple. I'm a member of the International Alliance to Abolish Weapons, and so I support them. I'm also a member of the World Wildlife Fund, and I spend a lot of time. I'm also a member of Doctors Without Borders. So you could get your young sons to introduce them to these organizations and show them some of the literature. Another thing that I'm big on, and I haven't really researched it yet, is the NFL has a campaign going on, Time Out Against Hate. Time Out Against Hate. And I think that's a great campaign and something we want to do. And then you got the same thing on any kind of education. Education is like the base. So anything we can do to educate our young children about these three issues is important. And as I mentioned to you earlier, Joe, we were probably off the air when we talked about this. It's our kids that are going to have to live with these three mega trends. They're the ones that are going to live with it. And we'll be here for a little longer, but not forever. And so these young kids need to be there. They need to be educated on these issues and then try to do something positive to change it.
Well, that was a great way, I guess, to wrap it up. I was going to ask for final thoughts, but I think that would be a great final thought. We just mentioned about the importance of showing the future generations what's really important to them. Where are they connecting? Where connecting to find more about you, more about your book?
The website, www.theentity.us. And when you go to that, you'll see links to my publisher, Atmosphere Press, and Book Baby. And then you'll also see links to Amazon for the novels. There's 3 novels. One has a subtitle, Hope 2147. The second novel has Desperation 2647. and that's where half of Florida's underwater, and you have to wear a cooling vest to even walk outside. And then the third novel, which is just coming out now, is Extinction. That's the subtitle. Earth's Exocide Extinction 3147. And that's where humanity fights its last battle on Earth and the robots win.
Well, David, thank you much for being on the podcast, and I really do appreciate it. All links will be in the show notes for this episode. Thank you much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Joe, thank you. And I hope there was something in there that someone could help their kids with. They're the future.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. That's going to be a wrap for episode 156 of the podcast. I hope this chat with David Collier gave you something to really think about. I know it did for me. These are big topics like AI, climate change, and just how we treat each other. They're not just headlines. They're a part of the world our kids are growing up in. So here's the question for you. What's one thing you can do, even something small, to make a better future? I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can always connect with me over at nosittingonthesideline.com. I'd love to keep this conversation going there with you. If you want to catch up the episode again or share it with someone you care about, head over to nosittingonthesideline.com/156. Until next time, take care, give your kids a hug, tell how much you love them. God bless. See ya.